Hey, everybody, Off the Mic Sports Network here, another edition of Off the Top Rope. So, one of the big discussion points in professional wrestling right now is TKO. I've made no secrets about it. I mean, maybe I get a little bit defensive because I think a lot of people are overreacting, and I've talked about this on the channel. If you think that this era of WWE is worse than what was going on under Vince McMahon, you're crazy. Um, but one thing I need to address, and I've talked about this. I talked about this post WrestleMania. Um, I'm growing a little bit concerned about the direction of TKO controlling WWE because here's one reason. Whether you love him or you hate him, Triple H has done a lot of good for WWE. But there was an interesting quote from Jonathan Coachman, the coach, formerly in WWE. He has a two-man power trip of wrestling podcast. I think he does it with Vince Russo. That's an interesting name to be doing something with. But Coach basically was quoted recently on this podcast saying, quote, "We predicted that within 18 months, Triple H will not be running WWE anymore. I actually feel kind of bad for him because I've always really, really liked him." There's a lot of Triple H got a lot of bad PR the week of WrestleMania. A lot of people claiming WWE's MAGA. He was kind of, speaking, I'm not going to say glowingly, but he kind of spoke positively about Donald Trump, the president of the United States. But what's separate from that, and I've kind of pointed to this because Rock has made some interesting comments. It feels like there has been a power struggle within WWE that goes all the way back to last year leading into WrestleMania. If you guys remember how that whole situation played out, WWE clearly had a plan in place to have Cody Rhodes beat Roman Reigns at WrestleMania. That was clearly what they wanted to do. Rock came in the 11th hour right before the Royal Rumble and pretty much derailed that. And once the fans called it bullshit, they changed their mind. And, it turned into one of the great WrestleMania builds and one of the great WrestleMania conclusions ever. And then this year, you have Rock come in out of nowhere a couple weeks to announce, hey, WrestleMania is going to New Orleans. Boy, that aged really well. And then he showed up for that incredible segment with Cody Rhodes and John Cena, where John Cena turned heel, and then they never paid that off. And we ended up getting one of the worst after one of the great conclusions of WrestleMania of all time, involving The Rock doing good business, even though he probably didn't want to do it and his ego got hurt. You then follow it up with one of the worst WrestleMania endings with Travis Scott helping John Cena win the world title, the WWE title. And then apparently, I don't know if you guys saw this, Wolfgang, a part of Gallus, who's no longer with WWE, they helped The Rock train for that match at WrestleMania. And apparently there was some issues over, private jets being utilized. Like WWE expected The Rock to fly in on a private jet. Rock expected WWE to pick him up. And it feels like this giant dick swinging competition between The Rock and the TKO side, and Triple H and, Triple H and his side of everything. There's no two ways about this. If this power struggle continues to roll on, much like Jonathan Coachman says, Triple H is not going to survive. I hate to say it. Triple H will not survive a power struggle with Dwayne Johnson. It's not happening. And that's not because he's The Rock. I'm saying because Dwayne Johnson, not The Rock, he's in tight with, Ari Emanuel, the head of TKO. He's in tight with Nick Khan, who's the president, one of the highest level executives in WWE. They're going to side not only with Dwayne Johnson because he's The Rock and he's one of the most famous people in the world. That's one of their best friends. And it sucks, man, that we have to reach this point where the guy who's actually doing all the good for what happened and all the success that has led to it. And, it's been great that TKO's backed him and, supported him in a lot of the wrestling decisions. But you're starting to see recently that when TKO gets involved, bad things have happened. It's not quite to the level of how bad things were with Vince McMahon, but I liken it to like a dysfunctional organization in like a professional sport. Like, let me give you guys an example. I'm a Cleveland Browns fan. For those of you guys who have subscribed to this channel for my sports content, I'm a big Cleveland Browns fan. They made a horrible trade for Deshaun Watson. because they were so desperate for a quarterback and they needed to go out and do something. So they went and got a guy who hadn't played in 2 years, gave him an absurd amount of money, guaranteed, which had never been done before, and it burned badly on them. And now you've got multiple voices, multiple cooks in the kitchen, and Rock thinks he knows what he's doing. Triple H thinks he knows what he's doing. And then you've got Ari Emanuel, who's a businessman, Nick Khan, who's been running the WWE and the business side too. You just got so many people in this. And once it rears into, like, like in sports, it would be like the personnel. But the creative decision and the product that goes out in front of the fans, that is what matters the most. And what sucks right now is you've got Ari Emanuel and you've got all these people, and Mark Shapiro, I think, is another one of the executives. They're concerned about the dollars and cents. They are concerned about making this company profitable. And that means charging everybody up the wazoo, supply and demand, economics. Like, if you don't have a lot of money, you're not going to be able to buy a ticket to a WWE show. So up yours is basically what they're saying. But from a wrestling content perspective, when you've got a guy like The Rock, who, now has way more power than he should ever have, in my opinion, and especially when it comes to wrestling decisions, he tries to come in and do everything that he wants, and he wants to do the match with Roman Reigns on his time. And it's like, no, like, WWE actually had a long running story that people were invested in, and they rejected you because of it. And Rock, I think, has been taking that personally because, hey, the only reason why he ever wanted to do the match is because, hey, there was an actor's strike. There was an actor's strike in late 2023, early 2024. And it's just like, oh, hey, you know what? I want to do it. And it's just, it's when you have so many of these voices going on at some point, push is going to come to shove. And if there is a power struggle, the way that I have seen this, and I talked about this after WrestleMania, and I think there is still some bad blood boiling over from what happened at WrestleMania 40 and the build to that. And I think there's a lot of people who had their egos checked, Dwayne, who had their egos checked and really, had to kind of, I guess, be humbled a little bit because, like I said, you had people fighting over, like, travel, even though these are some of the richest people in the world. And you're like, what the fuck do they need to, have a dick swinging competition over who flies who, where, or whatever. But yeah, it's just, like I said, the longer this goes on, the worse I'm going to feel about it because at some point, and I don't know what the timeline looks like, Coach knows Triple H, Coach knows Rock, he knows some of the people involved in this. He's got people on the inside. So, I mean, I'll trust his opinion. And, I don't know if this is a source, this is purely speculation. Listen, if it keeps going down this road and these guys don't figure out how to work together, then, TKO is going to make a decision and Triple H is going to be out of power. And to me, that's not good for WWE. He hasn't been a perfect booker, but if you look at what his decisions were made in terms of what was affected by TKO, mostly Rock, and I don't know probably Brian Gewirtz, who's been one of his head writers, would be involved in that. It's just not going to end well. And at that point, then I'm going to say, okay, this isn't quite what Vince McMahon was, but it's going to get there because, like, I don't trust the creative of that. Like, I know what I've seen, and Triple H has done a lot more good for WWE than Dwayne The Rock Johnson has ever done, at least in the last, decade or so. So, yeah, I'm worried. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I'm worried about where this is going. And like I said, longer it wails on and the more public and, a lot of these strange, bizarre moves get made, you're going to start thinking about, okay, if people start publicly turning on the company, who's going to get blamed for that? It's going to be Triple H. And like, again, like, it just almost seems like it's being set up that he's being set up to be the fall guy of this whole thing, because at some point this momentum that they've got and, like, this whole profitability thing is not going to continue. And it's just like, you're just seeing a lot of these public things that are going on and, like, the whole WrestleMania thing. And at some point we're going to get to another big show and it's going to be Rock again out in front of us because, Rock is going to need attention because this is how the guy operates when he's Like when Black Adam bombed, he needed to show up. And, this is just the way this guy operates. So, again, I don't like it. I don't like public spats. I don't like dysfunctional organizations, yet I still support one in the Cleveland Browns. And I literally am starting to see one of those play out in front of my eyes in WWE and TKO. So we'll see where this goes. It's going to be interesting to monitor. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.